The morning frost crunched beneath my boots as I paced the wooden platform of Cottonwood Springs Station. Every passing minute stretched like an hour as I waited for the 10 o'clock train from St. Louis. 6 months of letters exchanged with Eleanor. Bennett had led to this moment, the day my mail-order bride would finally arrive to begin our life together in this small Montana Territory town. "Still looking like you might bolt, Nathan?" Sheriff Hank Lawson laughed, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Relax, son. Half the men in this town found wives through catalogs. It's as normal as ordering seeds for spring planting these days." I adjusted my freshly pressed shirt collar for the 20th time. "This isn't seeds we're talking about, Sheriff. This is my future wife, a woman I've never met face to face." "Those letters of hers seem mighty fine to me when you read 'em at the saloon," he said, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Educated lady with refined sensibilities. Wasn't that how she put it? Just what a rising businessman like yourself needs. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The distant whistle cut through our conversation, sending my heart racing like a startled Mustang. The black iron locomotive came into view, steam billowing as it slowed its approach to our small station. In that moment, everything I'd built over the last 5 years flashed before my eyes. The general store that had grown into the largest mercantile in 3 counties, the 2-story house on Pine Ridge Road that sat waiting with new furniture and lace curtains, and the emptiness I couldn't seem to fill no matter how successful my business became. "There she comes," the sheriff muttered, stepping back. "Good luck, Nathan. Remember, first impressions count." The train screeched to a halt, belching clouds of steam that momentarily obscured my view of the passenger cars. As the haze cleared, passengers began emerging, mostly rough-looking men heading to the mining operations further west, and a few traveling salesmen I recognized. Then, standing alone on the steps of the second passenger car, I saw her. Eleanor. Bennett stood precisely as she'd described herself, 5 feet 4 inches tall, with chestnut hair pinned neatly beneath a modest blue bonnet. Her traveling suit, though clearly well worn, had been meticulously pressed, and she clutched a small valise in gloved hands. But it was her eyes that caught me off guard. Deep amber brown, and scanning the platform with an intensity that suggested she was assessing every detail, every person, every potential threat. These weren't the eyes of a sheltered schoolteacher from Boston, as her letters had claimed. "Mr. Blackwood?" she called, her voice carrying a genteel accent that didn't quite match the alertness in her gaze. "Nathan Blackwood?" I stepped forward, removing my hat. "Miss Bennett, welcome to Cottonwood Springs." The smile that spread across her face transformed her entirely, softening those watchful eyes and revealing a dimple in her right cheek. "How wonderful to finally meet you in person. Your letters hardly did you justice." As I took her valise and offered my arm, Sheriff Lawson tipped his hat in greeting. Something in his expression gave me pause, a slight narrowing of his eyes as he studied Eleanor, the same look he got when something didn't quite add up in one of his investigations. "Sheriff Hank Lawson, ma'am," he introduced himself. "We're mighty pleased to welcome you to our town." Eleanor's grip tightened almost imperceptibly on my arm. "How fortunate to meet the law so quickly. In Boston, one could live an entire lifetime without crossing paths with a police officer." "Small towns are different that way," Lawson replied, his gaze never leaving her face. "Everybody knows everybody's business before long. Makes for a safe community, wouldn't you agree?" "Indeed," she answered, her smile unwavering, though something flickered behind her eyes. "Though I've always valued a certain measure of privacy." "Don't we all?" he responded with a chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "Don't we all?" As we walked toward my waiting wagon, I couldn't shake the sense that something unspoken had passed between my future bride and the sheriff, like two chess players making initial assessments across the board. "Is there another trunk coming, miss?" "Bennett?" I asked, noticing the smallness of her single bag. "No, I'm afraid not," she replied, her voice dropping slightly. "There was an unfortunate incident during a stop in Chicago. My belongings were taken while I refreshed myself at the station. This valise was fortunately with me at the time." "How terrible," I said, helping her onto the wagon seat. "We'll have to remedy that immediately. My store carries everything you might need until we can order more personal items from the catalogs." "You're very kind," she murmured, arranging her skirts. "Kinder than I deserve, perhaps." I was about to respond when I noticed Sheriff Lawson had followed us to the wagon, his hand resting casually on his holster belt, as was his habit. "Miss Bennett," he called, "one quick question before you settle in. You mentioned Boston. Whereabouts? Did you teach school there? My sister-in-law's family is from that area." Eleanor's posture stiffened imperceptibly. "Beacon Hill, primarily. The Winthrop Academy for Young Ladies. Though I doubt your relations would know it. It was quite small and exclusive." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Perhaps not, then. Curious, though, I could have sworn I detected a slight southern inflection in your speech. My mistake, clearly." "Many have remarked on the unusual quality of my accent," she replied smoothly. "My mother was educated in Charleston before moving north. I'm told I inherited her speech patterns." "Fascinating how those things carry through generations," Lawson said, stepping back from the wagon. "Well, I won't keep you folks. Nathan, don't forget the town meeting tomorrow about the railway expansion." As we pulled away from the station, I noticed Eleanor release a breath she seemed to have been holding. The sheriff remained standing where we'd left him, watching our departure with that same thoughtful expression. "Is everything all right?" I asked as we headed down Main Street toward my store, where I'd planned to show her the town's establishments before taking her to the house. "Of course," she replied, composure returning to her features. "It's merely been a long journey, and I find myself unaccustomed to the attentions of strangers. In Boston, one maintains a certain anonymity even among acquaintances." I nodded, though. Something about her explanation rang hollow. "The sheriff means well. He's protective of this town and everyone in it. Been that way since the incident with the Harmon gang 3 years back." "Harmon gang?" she asked, a new alertness in her voice. "Bank robbers," I explained. "They shot 2 townspeople before Lawson, and a posse tracked them into the mountains. He was the only one who came back alive, but he brought all 4 gang members to justice, dead, but justice nonetheless." Eleanor turned her face toward the passing buildings, but not before I caught the flash of something like fear cross her features. How efficient of him. "That's our sheriff," I agreed, pulling the wagon to a stop in front of Blackwood Mercantile. "And this is my establishment. Your home away from home, as it were, until the wedding next week." As she gazed up at the large storefront with Blackwood, Mercantile and Dry Goods painted in gold lettering across the front, I saw genuine appreciation in her expression. "You've done very well for yourself, Nathan," she said softly. "Your letters didn't exaggerate." "I believe in honest advertising," I replied with a smile, helping her down from the wagon. "Just as I hope you do, Miss Bennett." Our eyes met for a moment, and something vulnerable and genuine flashed across her face before the composed exterior returned. "Please," she said, "call me Eleanor. After all, we're to be married in a week's time." As I escorted her into the store, I couldn't help but notice a weathered wanted poster tacked to the sheriff's board across the street. From that distance, I couldn't make out the face clearly, but something about the silhouette seemed strangely familiar. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That evening, after showing Eleanor around town and settling her into the guest room of my house, I found myself unable to sleep. Her reaction to Sheriff Lawson kept playing through my mind, along with a dozen small inconsistencies. I'd noticed throughout the day the way she'd flinched when Mrs. Holloway, the baker's wife, had touched her arm in greeting, how she'd positioned herself with her back to the wall in every establishment we'd entered, the moment she'd expertly calculated the change due when we'd purchased fabric for her new dresses before my clerk could even reach for the counting beads. And most tellingly, the calluses on her hands when she'd removed her gloves, not the hands of a schoolteacher, but of someone who'd known hard, practical work. Just past midnight, I gave up on sleep and made my way downstairs for a glass of whiskey. As I passed the guest room, a sliver of lamplight showed beneath the door, and I heard the unmistakable sound of quiet weeping. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. Whatever secrets Eleanor Bennet harbored, she'd brought them to my doorstep. For a reason. The question that burned in my mind as I continued downstairs was whether those secrets might endanger more than just our potential happiness. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and biscuits. Following the aroma to the kitchen, I found Eleanor already dressed and busy at the stove, her hair neatly pinned and an apron protecting her borrowed dress. "Good morning," she said brightly, though I noticed the slight puffiness around her eyes. "I hope you don't mind. I wanted to make myself useful." "Not at all," I replied, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. It was stronger and better than any I'd made for myself in the 5 years I'd lived alone in this house. "You didn't have to do this." "Perhaps not," she said, turning back to the stove. "But I wanted to. After your generosity yesterday, the new fabric, the toiletries, offering me this beautiful home to stay in until the wedding, it seemed the least I could do." As we sat down to breakfast, I decided on directness. "Eleanor, I heard you crying. Last night." The fork she'd been raising to her lips froze midway. After a moment, she carefully set it down. "I apologize if I disturbed your rest." "That's not my concern," I said gently. "My concern is for you. If there's something troubling you, something I should know before we proceed with the wedding—" "There isn't," she interrupted, then immediately softened her tone. "That is to say, nothing that should concern you. The tears were merely the release of tension after a long journey, the realization that I've left behind everything familiar for a new life with a man I know only through letters." It was a reasonable explanation, yet something in her delivery felt rehearsed. Before I could press further, a sharp knock at the door made us both jump. Eleanor's hand knocked over her water glass, sending liquid streaming across the tablecloth. "I'll get that," I said, rising. "It's probably just Jedediah with the morning deliveries." But it wasn't my store clerk at the door. Sheriff Lawson stood on my porch, his expression grim, a folded paper in his hand. "Morning, Nathan," he said, his eyes moving past me to where Eleanor stood in the kitchen doorway. "Miss Bennet, I hope I'm not interrupting breakfast." "Not at all, Sheriff," I replied, stepping back to let him enter. "What brings you by so early?" Lawson removed his hat, turning it in his hands, a gesture I'd seen him make only when delivering difficult news. "I received a telegram from the marshal's office in Denver last night. Seems they're tracking a fugitive who might have come through on yesterday's train." His eyes lifted to Eleanor, who had gone completely still. "A woman matching Miss Bennet's description." The silence in the room thickened until Eleanor broke it with a soft, brittle laugh. "Surely you're mistaken, Sheriff. I'm a schoolteacher from Boston, as my letters to Mr. Blackwood clearly established." "That may well be," Lawson replied, unfolding the paper in his hand, "but I'd be remiss in my duties if I didn't investigate the striking similarities. The telegram describes a woman 5'4", chestnut hair, brown eyes, traveling alone, last seen boarding a westbound train in Kansas City." He paused. "They're particularly interested in her because she's suspected of involvement with the Harmon gang." The color drained from Eleanor's face, and in that moment I knew with crushing certainty that Sheriff Lawson's suspicions were correct. My mail-order bride was not who she claimed to be. That's dozens of women who could match that description, I protested, though my heart wasn't in it. Surely you need more than a vague physical resemblance to accuse a respectable lady. I'm not accusing anyone yet, Lawson interrupted, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. I'm simply making inquiries. The telegraph operator is sending a response to Denver with a request for more specific details. In the meantime, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small, worn photograph, holding it up for both of us to see. The woman in the image was younger, her hair longer and flowing loose around her shoulders, her expression defiant rather, and then demure. But the eyes, those same watchful, intelligent eyes, were unmistakable. "Is this you, Miss Bennett?" Lawson asked quietly. "Or should I say, Miss Sarah Harmon, sister of Jacob Harmon, leader of the gang I brought down 3 years ago?" The water glass Eleanor had been holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the wooden floor. "I think," she said, her accent slipping to reveal a distinctly southern drawl, "that we need to have a serious conversation, gentlemen." The air in my kitchen seemed to vanish as Eleanor, or Sarah, raised her chin and met Sheriff Lawson's gaze. All those little moments that hadn't quite fit suddenly locked into place like tumblers in a safe. The way she'd scanned every room before entering, her precise knowledge of monetary calculations, those hardened calluses that no schoolteacher would possess. "You've made a grave miscalculation, Sheriff," she said, her refined Boston accent completely gone, replaced by a honeyed southern drawl that sent shivers down my spine. "Coming here alone wasn't wise." Lawson's hand drifted to his holster, but didn't draw. "I didn't come unprepared, Miss Harmon. Deputy Collins is watching the back door, and I've got 2 men across the street." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Always the careful tactician. That's why Jacob underestimated you." Her eyes flicked to me, something like regret passing through them. "I'm sorry, Nathan, truly." My throat felt desert dry. "For lying? Or for planning to—" "What exactly? What was your intention in coming here and agreeing to marry me?" "At first, revenge." The blunt admission knocked the wind from my lungs. "Sheriff Lawson killed my brother and the only family I had left in this world. I wanted to destroy something he valued, this town, its prosperity, its peace." Lawson's weathered face hardened. "Your brother put guns to innocent people's heads, shot a young mother and an elderly bank teller who wasn't moving fast enough for his liking. I know what Jacob did." Her voice cracked with genuine anguish. "I never claimed he was a saint, but he was all I had after the war took everything else." I found my voice again, anger beginning to replace shock. "So I was just, what, a convenient way into town, a pawn in your game against the sheriff?" Her eyes met mine, and the raw emotion in them made me step back. "At first, yes, but then your letters came, and they were so—" She trailed off, struggling to find words. "So full of simple decency, of honest dreams. No man had ever spoken, or to me that way, like I was worthy of building something rather than just taking it." Sheriff Lawson scoffed. "A touching tale. Almost had me reaching for my handkerchief. Now are you coming to the jail peacefully, or—" "She's not going anywhere yet," I interrupted, surprising myself, and both of them. "Not until I hear the full truth. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." Eleanor, Sarah, sank into a kitchen chair, her shoulders slumping in a way I hadn't seen before. The carefully constructed poise had vanished, revealing the exhaustion beneath. "Jacob wasn't just killed, he was humiliated," she began, her voice hollow. "Stories circulated about how he begged for mercy, how he died a coward. Sheriff Lawson became a hero, while my brother became a cautionary tale." Her eyes lifted to the lawman. "I know my brother. Whatever else he wasn't a coward. He wasn't," Lawson admitted, surprising us both. He fought to the end, took a bullet in the shoulder and still nearly got the drop on me. It was his partner Walsh who broke and ran. Something shifted in her expression. You never told that part of the story. Wasn't my story to embellish? I did my job, brought down men who'd murdered innocent people. That's all. Sarah's fingers traced a pattern on the tablecloth. After Jacob died, the gang scattered. Some were caught, some disappeared. I was left with nothing but a name that made people cross the street when they heard it. I tried honest work, but who'd hire a Harmon? So you turned outlaw yourself? Lawson pressed. I survived, she corrected sharply. Never killed anyone, never drew a gun on an innocent. But yes, I worked with what was left of my brother's connections, small cons mostly, enough to eat and keep moving. I leaned against the wall, trying to reconcile this woman with the one I'd imagined while reading her carefully crafted letters. Then you saw my advertisement. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. In a newspaper lining a drawer in a Denver boarding house. I'd been running 3 days from a job gone wrong. Needed to disappear. A mail-order bride heading to Montana Territory. Seemed perfect. New name, new life, respectable cover. And once you got here? I asked, dreading the answer. Her eyes held mine steadily. The plan was to establish myself, learn the town's vulnerabilities, then bring in men I knew for a big score. The bank, the mine payroll, your store, all tempting. Targets! Lawson swore under his breath, but I raised a hand to silence him. What changed? You did, she said simply. The man in those letters matched the man who met me at that station. Honorable, kind without being weak. The way you spoke about building something lasting, she shook her head. I started wondering if I could actually have that life, just for a little while before betraying everyone, Lawson finished harshly. Yes, she admitted, not looking away from my face. Though each day that passed made that plan feel more impossible, the silence stretched between us, heavy with what might have been. The home I'd built, the future I'd planned, all constructed on a foundation of lies. Yet something in her confession rang with a truth her letters never had. Sheriff, I said finally, I need to speak with her, alone. Lawson crossed his arms. Not happening, Nathan. She's the most wanted woman in 3 territories. For all we know, she's got accomplices waiting for a signal. I give you my word, I don't, Sarah said quietly. Not anymore. I cut those ties in Denver. I held Lawson's gaze. 10 minutes. Post your men wherever you need to, but give us 10 minutes. The sheriff studied me for a long moment before nodding grudgingly. 10 minutes. I'll be right outside this door. She makes one suspicious move. I'm coming back in with irons. He back toward the door, eyes never leaving Sarah. 10 minutes, Nathan, that's all. When the door closed behind him, I turned to the woman I'd planned to marry. In the harsh morning light, I could see the weariness etched around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. Did you ever intend to go through with the wedding? I asked, the question that had been burning in my chest since Lawson revealed her identity. I told myself I didn't, she answered, her voice barely above a whisper. That it would be a necessary charade, but yesterday when you showed me the house, spoke about children someday, and part of me wanted it to be real, wanted it more than I've wanted anything in a very long time. I ran a hand over my face, feeling the stubble from a sleepless night. You do realize there's nothing I can say that will stop Lawson from taking you in. The law is the law, I know. She stood, smoothing her borrowed dress with a gesture that seemed absurdly proper given the circumstances. I've been running so long, Nathan. Perhaps it's time to stop. Something in her calm acceptance broke through my anger. What were you crying about last night? The question seemed to catch her off guard. What? I heard you weeping. If it wasn't just journey fatigue as you claimed, what was it? She laughed, softly, the sound tinged with bitterness. I was crying because for the first time in years I felt safe. You showed me this beautiful home, introduced me to good people who smiled without knowing my name or history. You looked at me like I was—" She swallowed hard. "Like I was worthy of being looked at that way, and I knew it couldn't last. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." I crossed to the window, staring out at the town I'd helped build, the honest life I'd made through years of hard work and fair dealing. "Did you know Jacob was going to rob our bank? Before it happened, I mean." She shook her head firmly. "No, I was in St. Louis then. He sent for me after when they were hiding in the mountains, but I arrived too late." Her voice dropped. "Too late for everything." "If I believe you, and I'm not saying I do," I said carefully, "what exactly do you expect from me now?" Sarah moved to stand beside me at the window, not touching, but close enough that I could smell the faint lavender scent she wore. "Nothing. I expect nothing. I wouldn't, in your position." She paused. "But if you're asking what I hope for, I hope you'll tell the sheriff I cooperated, that I've changed. It won't keep me from prison, but it might keep me from the gallows." The brutal honesty of her words struck me harder than any plea for help could have. Before I could respond, a sharp knock at the door signaled Lawson's return. "Time's up," he called through the wood. I looked at Sarah. This woman I'd nearly married. This stranger I'd invited into my home and heart. One last question. Was any of it real? Anything in those letters? "The longing for a home was real," she whispered. "The hope that I could be more than my past. That was real too." The door opened and Lawson stepped in, handcuffs at the ready. "Let's go, Miss Harmon." She held out her wrists without resistance, her eyes never leaving mine. "If things had been different, Nathan Blackwood, I would have been proud to take your name." As Lawson led her out onto the porch, the morning sunlight caught her hair, turning it to burnished copper. Neighbors were beginning to gather, drawn by the unusual sight of the sheriff leading a woman in handcuffs from my home. "What's happening, Nathan?" Mrs. Holloway called from across the street. "Isn't that your mail-order bride?" I couldn't answer, couldn't find words to explain what had happened in the span of less than 24 hours. How I'd met a woman I thought would be my future, only to discover she was a remnant of this town's darkest chapter. "Official business," Lawson answered for me, guiding Sarah toward the jailhouse. I watched them go, feeling as though I should do something. What, I couldn't say. Defend her, denounce her. In the end, I simply stood in my doorway, frozen by indecision, as Sarah glanced back one final time. In that look was something I couldn't decipher. Regret, certainly, but also something that might have been a warning. It wasn't until evening that I understood why. I was sitting alone in my kitchen, a cold cup of coffee before me, when the first gunshot echoed through the town. Then another, and another. By the time I grabbed my rifle and made it to my front porch, Main Street was chaos. Horsemen, 6, maybe 7 of them, were firing indiscriminately as they thundered toward the jailhouse. Leading them was a man I recognized from wanted posters, Ethan Walsh, Jacob Harmon's former lieutenant. They hadn't come for the bank or the mine payroll. They'd come for Sarah. Gunsmoke hung thick in the evening air as I crouched behind an overturned wagon, the weight of my Winchester heavy in my sweating palms. Across the street, the jailhouse door splintered under the force of a shotgun blast. Inside that building were Sheriff Lawson, Deputy Collins, and Sarah Harmon, though in my mind she was still partly Eleanor, the woman who'd nearly been my wife. "Hold your fire," Walsh's voice carried over the chaos. "We only want the girl. Give us Sarah Harmon, and we'll ride out peaceable-like." Peaceable. The word was a mockery. 2 townspeople already lay wounded. Mr. Peterson from the telegraph office and young Billy Sims, barely 17, who'd had the misfortune of crossing the street with a delivery when the shooting started. I'd never been a fighting man. My battles had always been with ledgers and supply shortages, not bullets and blood. Yet here I was, prepared to defend a town, and within it, a woman who had planned to betray us all. Nathan! A harsh whisper came from my left. Jedediah, my store clerk, had taken position behind a water trough. They're going to rush the jail, too many of them for the sheriff to hold off. He was right. Lawson was good with a gun, and Deputy Collins was learning fast, but they were outmanned and outgunned. Whatever Sarah had done, whatever lies she'd told, I couldn't stand by and watch a slaughter. The answer came in a flash of desperate inspiration. "Jed, can you make it back to the store through the alley?" His eyes widened, but he nodded. "Think. So, they're focused on the jail. Get to the storeroom. Behind the winter blankets there's a crate marked mining supplies." I swallowed hard. "Bring me the dynamite." "Dynamite? You've gone loco? Just do it. And grab my Henry rifle from the office. The Winchester's too clumsy for what I'm thinking." As Jedediah disappeared down the alley, I tried to piece together how this had happened. Walsh shouldn't have known Sarah was here. Unless the tears last night, the regret in her eyes this morning. She'd known they were coming before we jump. Back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. A fresh volley of gunfire pulled me from my thoughts. Walsh and his men had taken up positions surrounding the jailhouse. Inside, Lawson was returning fire sporadically, conserving ammunition, I realized. Through the broken window, I caught a glimpse of Sarah's chestnut hair as she ducked behind a desk. "Last chance, Lawson," Walsh called out. "We're not here for you. Just the girl. She's one of us. Always has been." "That's where you're wrong," Lawson's voice came back, steady despite. "The dire situation. She's in my custody, and she stays that way." A burly outlaw with a red bandana laughed. "Your funeral, then?" The men began converging on the jailhouse from multiple angles. They'd storm it within minutes. Whatever I was going to do, it needed to happen now. A tap on my shoulder nearly made me discharge my rifle. Jedediah had returned, breathing hard, a small wooden crate in his arms, and my Henry rifle slung across his back. "Got what you asked for, though I still think you've lost your mind," he whispered, handing me the rifle. "What's the plan?" I quickly checked the Henry, the familiar weight more comforting than the Winchester had been. "See that awning above? The gunsmith shop. I need you to get up there with this." I pulled a stick of dynamite from the crate. "When I give the signal, light it and throw it into the street behind Walsh's men. Not to hit them, just to scatter them." "And what'll you be doing?" My mouth went dry as I explained. It wasn't much of a plan, more of a desperate gamble, but it was all we had. 3 minutes later, I was inching my way through the back of the barber shop, which shared a wall with the jailhouse. Old man Willis, the barber, crouched in the corner, wide-eyed and trembling. "Stay down," I whispered to him. "This will be over soon." The connecting door to the jailhouse was locked, but a key hung on a nail nearby. Lawson's idea in case the barber ever needed to seek shelter during trouble. I took it with shaking hands and eased the door open a crack. The scene inside froze my blood. Lawson was bleeding from a graze to his temple, grimly reloading his revolver. Deputy Collins lay unconscious, or worse, by the cells. And Sarah was standing in the middle of the room, her face ashen but determined. "Give me a gun," she was saying to Lawson. "I can help, so you can turn it on me the minute your friends break in." "Not likely." "They're not my friends," she hissed. "Not anymore. Walsh will kill me first thing. He always hated that Jacob favored me." I slipped inside, causing both of them to whirl toward me. Lawson's gun came up reflexively. "It's me," I said quickly, raising my hands. "I have a way out, but we need to move fast." Lawson's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What are you doing here, Nathan? This isn't your fight." "It became my fight when they shot up my town," I replied, then glanced at Sarah. Did you know they were coming? Is that what you were crying about last night? Her eyes, those amber-brown eyes that had haunted me since the train platform, filled with shame. I sent a telegram from Kansas City before boarding the train, telling Walsh I was heading to Cottonwood Springs to finish what Jacob started. She swallowed hard. But I never sent the signal I promised. I was supposed to leave a red scarf hanging from your store window if it was safe for them to come in. Lawson swore viciously. So you led them right. To us! I thought they wouldn't come without my signal. I thought I had time to... She trailed off, looking at me, to figure out if I could really leave that life behind. A bullet shattered what remained of the window, sending glass spraying across the floor. Outside, Walsh was shouting orders to prepare for a final assault. Save it, I snapped. Lawson, is Collins alive? The sheriff checked his deputy's pulse. Barely. Took a bullet high in the shoulder. He needs a doctor fast. Then here's what we're doing. I've got Jedediah positioned with dynamite. When it blows, we're going out the back through the barber shop. I have horses waiting in the alley. And go where? Lawson demanded. They'll just follow us. Not if they think they've got what they came for. I turned to Sarah. That's where. You come in. Her eyes widened as she grasped my meaning. You want me to go with them after everything I just told you? Not exactly. I pulled a spare bandana from my pocket. I want them to think you escaped in the confusion. You'll leave this where they'll find it, along with a few strands of your hair. Make it look like you slipped away in the chaos. Lawson shook his head. You're betting an awful lot on Walsh being fooled by such a simple trick. I'm betting on Walsh being greedy and arrogant, I corrected. Men like that see what they expect to see. Another volley of gunfire peppered the jailhouse. We were out of time. When the dynamite blows, count to 10, then move, I instructed, moving back toward the barber shop. And Lawson, the lady comes with us. His jaw tightened. She's my prisoner. And, she'll remain your prisoner. But she stays alive, I insisted. She deserves a proper trial, not a bullet from some outlaw. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Something in my voice must have convinced him, because he nodded grudgingly. I slipped back into the barber shop and made my way to the window, where I could see Jedediah in position. I raised my hand, gave the signal, and ducked. The explosion rocked the street, more thunder than destructive force, but it created exactly the diversion we needed. Shouts of confusion erupted from Walsh's men as they scrambled for cover, momentarily forgetting their target. I raced back to the jailhouse door. Now, what followed was a blur of frantic motion. Lawson hoisted his wounded deputy over his shoulder with surprising strength. Sarah pressed the bandana and several strands of her hair into a crack in the floorboards, visible enough to be found but not so obvious as to raise suspicions. Then we were moving through the barber shop, out the back door, and into the alley where 3 horses waited. Collins rides with me, Lawson grunted, managing to get the unconscious deputy onto his horse. Nathan, I'll take Sarah. I finished for him, already helping her onto my mount before swinging up behind her. Her body tensed against mine, then gradually relaxed as she realized I wasn't about to push her off. We rode hard, keeping to the shadows of buildings until we reached the edge of town, then broke into a gallop toward the foothills. Behind us, more shots rang out, followed by angry shouts. Walsh and his men, discovering their quarry, had somehow slipped away. They'll search the town first, Lawson said as we slowed to navigate a rocky slope. Then fan out. We've got an hour, maybe less. Where are we headed? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite everything. My hunting cabin, I replied. About 5 miles into the hills. Not much, but it's defensible and hidden. Lawson threw me a sharp look. You're risking a lot for a woman who lied to your face and endangered the whole town. I felt Sarah stiffen in front of me. I'm risking it for due process, Sheriff. Isn't that what separates us from men like Walsh? The cabin appeared as the moon rose, a small, solid structure nestled against a rocky outcropping that protected it from behind. A stream gurgled nearby, providing water and masking sounds. I'd built it 3 years earlier as a retreat from the pressures of running a growing business, never imagining it would serve as a refuge from gunmen. Inside was sparse, but adequate. A main room with a fireplace, a small bedroom, and basic supplies. While Lawson tended to Collins, laying him on the bed and cleaning his wound as best he could, I secured the perimeter, checking sightlines and potential approaches. Sarah stood awkwardly in the center of the main room, still in the dress she'd been wearing when Lawson arrested her that morning, a lifetime ago, it seemed. "There are some clothes in that trunk," I said, nodding toward a wooden chest. "Old hunting things, but they'll be warmer than that dress." She moved to the trunk, opened it, then paused. "Why are you doing this, Nathan? After what I planned to do to you, to your town, but you didn't do it," I replied simply. "You could have left that signal for Walsh. You didn't. That doesn't erase my intent. I checked the priming on my Henry, avoiding her gaze. Maybe not. But where I come from, a man, or woman, is judged by their actions, not just their thoughts." She pulled out a flannel shirt and canvas trousers. "Is that really it? Or are you still hoping the woman from those letters exists somewhere inside me?" The question hit closer to home than I cared to admit. Before I could answer, Lawson emerged from the bedroom, his expression grim. "Collins is holding on, but barely. He needs a real doctor, not my field dressing." "Nearest doctor is back in town," I said. "Unless—" My eyes drifted to Sarah, who had gone very still. "Unless what?" Lawson prompted. "Sarah, in your letters, Eleanor's letters, you mentioned medical training. Was that true, or just part of the deception?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It was true. After the war, I worked as a nurse in a Confederate veterans hospital. Before—" She trailed off. "Before your brother pulled you into his life," I finished. "Can you help Collins?" She glanced toward the bedroom, then at Lawson, whose face was a mask of suspicion. "I can try, but I'll need supplies. Clean bandages, whiskey, and needle and thread if you have them." As she gathered what she needed from my meager stores, Lawson pulled me aside. "You're putting a lot of faith in a known criminal," he muttered. "What if she decides to finish Collins off instead of saving him?" "Then she'll hang for sure," I replied. "But I don't think that's who she is." "You don't know who she is," he countered. "None of us do." I watched as Sarah rolled up her sleeves and moved with professional efficiency toward the bedroom. Maybe not, but I'm beginning to think she might not know either. For the next hour, we listened to Sarah work, occasionally calling out requests for water or another strip of cloth. Outside, the night deepened, bringing with it the howl of distant wolves and the even more ominous silence that meant men might be moving through the darkness hunting us. Finally, she emerged, wiping blood from her hands with a damp cloth. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but there was a calmness to her I hadn't seen before. "I've removed the bullet and cleaned the wound," she reported. "If infection doesn't set in, he has a good chance. He's young and strong." Lawson brushed past her to check on his deputy. When he returned, his expression had softened slightly. "You did good work in there." It was hardly effusive praise, but Sarah accepted it with a nod. "I learned from necessity, not choice." The sheriff moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. "They'll be coming. Question is, do they know about this cabin?" I shook my head. "Few people do. I've never brought anyone here except Jedediah, and he wouldn't talk." "Walsh has ways of making people talk," Sarah said quietly. "If they caught him—" The thought chilled me. Jedediah was loyal, but he was also barely 20 and had never faced men like Ethan Walsh. "We need to prepare for the possibility they'll find us," I said, moving to a loose floorboard and prying it up. Beneath it was a small cache of ammunition. "I keep extra supplies here, not enough for a prolonged siege, but enough to make them think twice." As I distributed cartridges, Sarah surprised us both by asking, "Will you show me how to load that rifle?" Lawson and I exchanged glances. "You've never fired a gun before?" he asked skeptically. "I know how to fire one," she replied. "Just never bothered learning how to load one properly." Jacob didn't think women needed to know that part. A howl pierced the night, closer this time and not from a wolf. The ululating cry was distinctly human, a hunter's call. "Walsh," Sarah whispered, her face draining of color. "That's his signal. They've picked up our trail." Lawson moved to the door, checking that the heavy bar was secure. "How many men does he have?" "5, maybe 6, she replied. "All killers. All loyal to him because they're afraid not to be." I handed her the Winchester I'd carried earlier. "Then, it's time you showed whose side you're really on." Our eyes met over the barrel of the rifle. In that moment, I saw not Eleanor Bennett, the refined schoolteacher, nor Sarah Harmon, the outlaw's sister, but simply a woman at a crossroads. One path leading back to darkness, the other toward something that might, against all odds, resemble redemption. "I don't expect you to believe me," she said softly, "but there's only one side I'm on now." Outside, the hunting cry came again, closer, hungrier, and then, cutting through the night like thunder, the first rifle shot. The bullet splintered wood inches from my face, sending sharp fragments slicing across my cheek. I dropped to the floor, dragging Sarah down with me as another shot punched through the cabin window. The sound echoed in the small space like a cannon blast, leaving my ears ringing. "They're in the trees to the west," Lawson hissed, belly-crawling to the opposite window, using the moonlight against us. Sarah's breath came hot against my neck as we pressed against the rough-hewn floor. In the darkness, I couldn't see her face, but I felt her trembling. Not with fear, I realized, but with a coiled tension, like a snake ready to strike. "Walsh never was much for patience," she whispered. "He'll try to draw us out, make us waste ammunition." Another shot rang out, followed by a man's voice, thick with mockery. "Come on out, little sister. Big brother Jacob would be mighty disappointed in your choice of company." Sarah's body went rigid against mine. I felt her fingers dig into my arm, her nails cutting half-moons into my skin, even through my shirt sleeve. "Ethan Walsh," she confirmed, her voice so low I barely caught it. "And if he's calling out, it means the others are circling around." Lawson swore softly, shifting his position to cover the rear window. "Nathan, your cabin have a cellar. Any way out besides the front door?" "No cellar," I replied, mentally kicking myself for never thinking to dig one. "But there's a trap door to the roof. Used it for repairs last summer." Sarah pulled away, searching my face in the dim light filtering through the bullet-riddled window. "A woman alone, on the run from her past, seeks refuge with a stranger through a marriage of convenience, only to bring death to his doorstep," she said, her voice hollow. "Seems the kind of tragic tale they print in those penny dreadfuls." Before I could respond, another volley of shots peppered the cabin. One caught the lantern, plunging us into near-total darkness save for the dying embers in the fireplace. "Save the poetry for later," Lawson growled. "If we live through this, you'll have plenty of time to reflect in a cell." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I fumbled in the darkness, finding my rifle where I'd dropped it. "Sarah, check on Collins. Make sure he's still breathing. Sheriff, cover me while I try for the roof access." The trapdoor was in the center of the main room, a simple square cut into the ceiling with a hinged wooden panel. In normal circumstances, I'd use a chair to reach it. Now, in the dark, with gunmen surrounding us, it seemed an impossible target. "I'll boost you," Lawson said, reading my thoughts. As Sarah slipped into the bedroom to check on Collins, the sheriff and I positioned ourselves beneath the trapdoor. He braced himself, interlocking his fingers to form a step for my foot. With a grunt, he heaved upward as I pushed off, my fingers just brushing the edge of the trapdoor. "Higher!" I gasped. Lawson adjusted his stance and pushed again. This time my fingers caught the edge. I pulled, and the trapdoor swung open, releasing a shower of dust and cool night air. I hauled myself up, then reached back to help Lawson. On the roof, the situation became immediately clearer and more dire. Walsh's men had indeed encircled the cabin. I counted 5 figures moving in the trees and brush, their positions betrayed by moonlight glinting off rifle barrels. "They've got us surrounded," I muttered, as Lawson joined me, crouching low to avoid being silhouetted against the sky. "Not quite," the sheriff corrected, pointing eastward where the terrain rose sharply into rocky slopes too steep for horses. "That's our way out, if we can make it." A lantern flared below, and a man stepped into the clearing before the cabin. Even from above I recognized Ethan Walsh from the wanted posters, tall and lean, with a shock of sandy hair and a distinctive gait that suggested an old injury. "Sarah Harmon," he called out, his voice carrying in the night stillness. "I know. You're in there. Your Boston act didn't fool anyone back in Denver. Let's stop this foolishness now." I motioned to Lawson to stay put as I belly-crawled back to the trapdoor. "Sarah," I called down softly, "what's Collins's status?" Her face appeared below me, pale in the darkness. "Alive, but feverish. He can't be moved, Nathan," I swore under my breath. "Then we can't leave him." Something shifted in her expression, a decision being made. "You have to, both of you. I'll stay with Collins." "Absolutely not," Lawson growled, joining me at the opening. "You're my prisoner, and you're not staying anywhere without me." Stop being a lawman and start thinking like a human being," she snapped, surprising us both with her vehemence. "Walsh wants me, not you. If I surrender, you can get Collins to safety." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You can't seriously be considering giving yourself up to those men?" Her laugh held no humor. "Of course not. I know what Walsh would do to me, but I can buy you time, make them think I'm alone." Walsh's voice came again, closer now. "Last chance, Sarah. Send out the sheriff and that storekeeper, and maybe I'll let you ride with us again." "He's lying," she said softly, "but he doesn't know I'm done believing him." Lawson's expression hardened with suspicion. "And why should we believe you? For all we know, this is exactly what you planned. Get us to leave, then signal your friends." Something flashed in her eyes, hurt, quickly masked. "Because of Collins, because I just spent an hour trying to save his life, and I'm not having that effort wasted." She paused, then added more quietly, "And because whatever else I am, whatever lies I've told, I'm not the monster Walsh is." I studied her face, searching for deception and finding only